In Salem, Oregon by telephone conference call. I will now call roll. Holly Scholas.
Present.
Colleen Forbes.
Present.
Julia Bailey.
Present.
Greg Ramirez.
Here.
Catherine Akerson Bailey.
Here.
Haley Beeson.
Here.
And Desiree Lang will not be joining us today due to other emergent priorities. My members, when you wish to speak, please state your last name for the record. For the record, public members calling into the public phone line are asked to email April Fleming at april.fleming@dhsoha.state.or.us and provide your first and last name. Public and interested parties' feedback may be heard during the public interested parties' feedback period if indicated on the agenda. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting board business. The meeting is called to order. Okay. So, go to my agenda here. So if we could do introductions. Holly, do you want to start?
Sure. Excuse me. My name is Holly Scholas. I live in Beaverton, Oregon the last 6 years. I've been a midwife for 45 years. I've been licensed since we were able to be licensed. I've been a member of the licensing board many years ago, and I'm the founder and president of Birthing Way College, which trains midwives. And I've taught LD&D since we've had LD&D.
Thank you, Holly. Colleen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Colleen Forbes and I am a licensed midwife in Eugene since 2002. And I have served on the licensing board on the midwifery board and was the chair for 6 years. And finished my term 2 years ago.
Wow, time flies. Has it been that long?
2020 was a non-year. That's why.
Right. Thank you. Julia Bailey.
I'm Julia Bailey. I'm a licensed midwife. I've been licensed since 2013. I practice in the Mid-Valley region. And I have been teaching LD&D since 2016 because I'm the OMC LD&D certifier and kind of inherited that. So that is me.
Thank you. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Greg Ramirez. I am the emergency manager for Clackamas Fire. I'm also a medical officer in the Army. I'm a critical care paramedic, and I've been a nurse practitioner. I was a nurse educator at OHSU for 7 years, and currently training medics and nurses in the Army.
Nice. Thank you very much. Catherine Akerson Bailey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a midwife in Portland. I've been licensed here since 2014, and I taught a pharmacology class at Birthing Way for a few years, so have dipped into some LD&D teaching as well.
Nice. Thank you very much. And Haley?
Hello, I'm Dr. Haley Beeson. I'm a nurse midwife in Portland, Oregon, currently working at Legacy Emmanuel, but was working at a hospital at Alma Midwifery in Portland, Oregon recently. I teach at an RN program in Portland, and prior to that worked as a high-risk L&D nurse for many years in Chicago. And I'm new to the group, so thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Cynthia Murphy. I'm the qualification analyst for the Health Licensing Office. I've been with the office for 25 years. I write education, training, and exams. I have not been involved in the board of direct entry midwifery for several years. In fact, just hit and miss a little bit here and there. However, I was involved in writing the LD&D with Holly upon the inception. And so that's been about 15 years ago. So, and then Sammy?
Hi, my name is Sammy Patnode. I'm the policy analyst for HLO, specifically this board. I've had the pleasure of working with this board pretty in depth for over a decade now. So with Holly doing her membership when I was still green, and then with Colleen when I was more veterans and writing the new rules as they are now. So I'm
Hey,
here to help
Sammy.
with the kind of what?
You can hardly understand you.
You're in a bubble. Yes.
Okay.
I find that turning your volume down works.
Hold on. How's that? Better?
No.
I don't know what to do now. What if everybody's, does that help?
You're doing a fast cycling echo. It's echoing like 4 times.
Let me leave and come back. So keep going.
Cynthia, are you muted? I can't hear anything.
Well,
Am I still underwater?
Say something,
Okay,
Sammy.
better?
Yes,
Better?
it is better.
Okay. Well, I hope everyone knows me. You'll get to know me if you don't.
Sam is an integral part of our agency and got her hands deep within the Board of Direct Entry Midwifery, and she has been with the office for 25 years, and she is a resource for everyone in the office, and I personally couldn't do it without Sammy. So anyway, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Sammy, so thank you. And I have given a little spiel that nobody could hear, so I'll just kind of go over it again real quick. It was in regards to the Board of Direct Entry Midwifery on April 15, 2021, tasking the Health Licensing Office with assembling this education committee to review legend drugs and devices, initial continuing education, and to determine which requirements must be completed to obtain licensure in Oregon. The committee will be tasked with reviewing education completed at in-state and out-of-state schools, other state licensure, including previous experience, methods to verify education and experience, and additional educational requirements, including supervisory requirements. All recommendations will be presented to the board for final approval and implementation, and that is it. And so we did have our first meeting scheduled on September 8th August 26th, and it was canceled due to a phone technical issue with a phone dial-in code. And we could not hold that meeting because we would be in violation of public meetings law. So I apologize for that. However, we were able to have a business meeting and obtain some information and just get some information from Holly Scholas in regards to just her thoughts and ideas, and so it wasn't a wasted day per se. And I'm going to turn it over to Sammy because Sammy can kind of give you a historical overview in regards to legend drugs in themselves and the law and the rules, and go from there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview. In 2001 is when the law became effective for midwives to administer and purchase legend drugs and devices. And then from there, And what it did is kind of give a summary of what you could use and what you could administer, and then a very brief law that says you must have training, and that training would be recognized upon a renewal of your license. So at that time, we need to get everybody who was currently a midwife on board, knowing what they need to know, and then moving forward with renewal after that. So that's where the original curriculum came in. I believe it was 40 hours then. 40 hours? Yeah. And then over time it's changed. We added the GBS part to it. Colleen helped me with that. And then now we're at 48 hours. And then the renewal piece, the 5 hours, which was 8.5 hours, now it's 5 hours. And then kind of moving forward, how does the board want that to look? I think kind of just in what I've heard is not basing it solely so much on hours, but more on competencies and meeting proficiency in certain areas, what that looks like. What that looks like initially, is that different? So they meet it initially, and then every 2 years that same proficiency is met. Does that change from their initial renewal and then each subsequent renewal? So those are kind of things we need the board to, or this committee, to sift through. How is this stuff obtained? Is it obtained through a school? Is it obtained through an organization? Could it be obtained through another, somebody who's already licensed, say an LDM who has this training already, and they could know that the skill is there, and then ensure that the applicant and or renewer meets that proficiency, and is that enough? And then also to make sure that the applicant and or renewer knows what they need going in, that they understand what they need to know. So some kind of criteria, objectives, probably not an entire curriculum. That's, we try to keep that in the educator's hand, but just some highlighted areas where we know they need to meet proficiency, and then how do we ensure that skill has been met, which sounds like some kind of a skill assessment, just based on what I've heard over the years in our meeting with Holly, which I very appreciate that, Holly. That was very helpful. So it's a big task. We know that it's going to take some time, and we may not get it right the first time. There'll be a couple pieces that happen. So you guys will meet, and then the board will determine how to move forward, and then there'll have to be a rule put in place to make it official. So this is what you have to do in order to become licensed and stay licensed. And then so that's a process, right? And so over time, this process will get less convoluted and more grounded in dates and times. But at this point, we don't know what that looks like. So again, we appreciate your time. It's probably going to be a long haul, but hopefully we can weed out and get down to the crux of what we know is going to keep the public safe when midwives are administering legislative drugs and devices, and then ensuring that safety as a continued renewal. How's that for PC? Really good, huh?
Very good.
Okay, go ahead, Cynthia. I'll let you take it from there.
So
Can I
one of
ask
the
a question, Cynthia, real quick?
Yes.
Sammy, could you summarize for us what the actual statute says we have to do? Is that something you have accessible to you? That might be
100%.
I knew
Yes,
you
I'll
would.
tell you right. Ta-da, the Bible. So it's 687, 425, renewal of license, effect of failure to renew. Number 2, the board shall prescribe requirements for renewal, including but not limited to continuing education that must include training in legislative drugs and devices. That is the objective. And so that's very broad. We could kind of drive a truck through that. We know it needs to be CEs, so we know CEs are tied to renewal. And we know there needs to be some kind of training. What that looks like, is it hour-based, is it proficiency-based, skill-based? That's something you guys get to decide. We do understand I'm not a lawyer, of course. And so in some cases, when we move down these paths, we need legal advice. And so part of what your guys' job will be, and my job will be, to decide when that is or isn't necessary, that in order for us to move one step further, do we need some legal advice from our legal counsel or not? So all of these pieces will, I promise, become less gray and less unclear as we go. But that's the basic premise of the law we can now build on in a rule. So thank you, Holly.
This is Holly again. So just to clarify, There is no requirement for initial training to become licensed. It's totally encoded as continuing education.
100%.
That's what I thought, but I just want to make sure everybody knew that.
100%.
And I also wanted to say, prior to our last meeting, I had sent each of the committee members 4 different emails that contain the laws and rules and information in regards to educational institutions and the MANA core competencies, or the candidate information booklet, and then also so I believe that was it. So that way you guys would have anything that you needed before or during this discussion to review and then talk about. If we needed to reference it, you guys would have it. One of the things I do want to talk about before we move forward is we have another committee meeting scheduled for October 28th. And unfortunately, I'm going to be out for surgery. And so we are going to have to reschedule that meeting. It's November, we could move into late November. However, then we have the holidays, which is not good. And then we could consider doing a meeting early November, or excuse me, early December, late December, then we get into the holidays again. So we could schedule out another early December meeting or move past the first of the year and do it like that. We have a meeting in January, on January 13th, a board meeting. So if we did an early December meeting, that would work out, if that worked out for everyone. And what we could do is look for some dates in early December and send them to the committee and try to get a consensus on what date worked for most everyone, or everyone, if that's okay with everyone. Because I think late November just doesn't work for anybody really okay. So we will reschedule that October meeting for early December, and we'll, April will send you an email to get a date together.
You don't want to try to do that right now, Cynthia?
We could. April, are you available?
Yes.
Because
Hello?
the 2nd of November or the 9th of, the 2nd of December or the 9th of December are nice, early, far away from the holidays days. Both Thursdays, because this is set on a Thursday. So keeping it the same day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have conflicting board meetings out there that you guys have to deal with?
No. We are clear in December.
Wow, not anymore.
Well, you guys are special. Midwives always get special treatment. We understand that.
So is 2 or 9 one of your favorite numbers, and we should pick that number? Or
There's nothing on the calendar. Unless April sees something I don't.
Nope, I don't see anything on here. We're good.
Well, then I would prefer the 9th because it's completely away from Hanukkah.
Okay.
Works for me.
Anybody else?
I'm tentatively available. I'm gonna be in Boston, depending on how the surge looks, for my sister's birth. She's due around that time, so I'll join if she's not in labor.
Okay.
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay,
Works for me.
perfect.
Perfect.
That way, if we need to follow
Right.
up in early January, we will have already gotten some more work done. You know.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome.
So
And
we
just,
will
just,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jen. Just to add to that, I will be, Cynthia or myself will be giving the board updates every meeting as we go along, whether it's a special meeting or a full board meeting. I'm at every meeting, and if Cynthia is able, she'll be there, but we'll keep them apprised of what's going on and just keep moving down the track.
Okay, so we will email you a revised agenda with the December 9th date on it and the removal of the October 28th date. And then I think that's all I have in regards to that. So let's talk about the current Legend Drugs and Devices initial education, 40 hours and then 5 for renewal. The 40-hour initial education upon administering or upon the first renewal, and then each subsequent renewal, the 5 hours of the continuing education in LD&D. So I think I'm going to open the floor to for discussion in regards to what your thoughts are, any ideas you may have, where you see this going in the future. Is there somebody who wants to start first? Holly?
Yeah, dang, I was trying to be quiet. This is Holly Scholas. Okay, so LD&D, the number of hours is an absolute minimum that's needed, not even a minimum. And the program was created not thinking as much about new midwives, but thinking about bringing already practicing midwives who were probably already using things and doing things in various ways, and knowing about things, bringing them into the legal fold and setting a minimum for practitioners who were already, say, giving injections and already doing some of these things. So at least at Birthing Way, when we educate brand new baby midwives and how to do these things, we spend many more hours than this on a brand new baby midwife than the LD&D requirement is. Many, like maybe 5 times as much total as this minimum curriculum requires, maybe more. For instance, to graduate, they have to do 20 live successful IV starts, not 3, as an example. So also they're in a preceptorship where they're getting practice from approved preceptors to do these things. Now that's just the school. Now out for people who don't attend a school, they are going through the PEP process, which they're working with a preceptor doing many of these skills. And they're again getting many, many more hours, but they may or may not have formal education in it by attending a workshop or whatever. They haven't attended a school, but they're using a competency-based route. So so that's for new midwives, brand new babies. But what we also see happening in Oregon is people moving into the state who receive their education somewhere through either PEP or through a school, a MEC accredited school. And they come in often already with the knowledge and skills, maybe already with a credential. And the way things are set up now, they still have to take the 40 hours of initial education, even though they've already had an initial education somewhere else. So we have this hodgepodge of different people with different backgrounds coming in who want to be licensed and want to be able to professionally use drugs and devices. And all those different backgrounds and different abilities is the challenge to figuring out how do we make one system that works well for everybody, because the current system doesn't work well for everybody. For instance, Birthing Way does not feel good about offering the 40-hour initial as if that's saying this is enough for you. If you have nothing else other than these 40 hours, that's good enough to be able to start an IV, give an injection of a potentially dangerous drug, etc. So, so myself and many others, including people on this very call, have come to independently and together to the conclusion that what really matters is, are people competent, right? Do they know what they need to know and do what they need to do? And rather than worrying about how many hours of training they have or where they got their education, given that we don't have a system by choice, which is tied into you must graduate from an accredited program, then how do we ensure that Oregonians who use the services of licensed midwives are receiving the highest, most competent quality care from their midwives around Legend Drugs and Devices? And that's why back in January of 2019 at a board meeting, several people testified. Colleen was on the board at the time. I know Julia was there. I testified. Silka Akerson testified. At least one midwife from out of state who was getting licensed in Oregon testified to the importance of moving to a competency-based model. So in other words, let's not worry so much about where people went to school or what their preceptor did, but can they successfully and correctly start an IV, give an injection, etc. And do they know what they need to know about the drugs? And however they can document and the other the devices that they're using. So the idea was to come up with a way for us to set standards for who would, what skills are being assessed, which is set out pretty well in the rules, what we're able to do, you know, start IVs, administer meds, do IV antibiotics, etc. So what skills are involved in that? Use tools that are already out there that break down the steps and give a list of resources, and then decide which skills tests need to be administered and what the criteria are for people to administer them, some of which would be obvious, like if you're a MEEC accredited program, if you're a professional organization, but potentially creating avenues for other people to be able to administer these tests and other, you know, other types of programs potentially. And then also same thing for the knowledge. What is the basic knowledge that needs to be assessed? And without going into curriculum about how people learn it at all, just these are these, or writing specific test questions even, these are the topics that must be tested. And that way, somebody who moves in from out of state who already holds a credential or already has experience or attended a school, whether it was MEEC accredited or not, if they can pass the test, yay. Or if they are a PEP program student, if they can pass the assessments, the written assessment and the competency assessments, then yay. And if they attended a MEEC accredited school, which incorporates those assessments into the curriculum, and they can have documentation that they pass those assessments as part of that program, then yay, everybody's meeting the same assessments, everybody's meeting the same competencies. So it's moving the burden away from documenting how you got your training, as well as demonstrating the skills and the knowledge, and just focusing on the demonstration of the skills and knowledge. And so, so that's what my understanding is of kind of, that's where I support us moving forward, is in emphasizing those competencies and figuring that out. Sorry.
I have a question off one of the things that you said, Holly, in regards to birthing weight, not feeling comfortable with somebody coming to take that 40-hour program and that's the only thing they're going to get. Where would that person be coming from? Would that person be coming through the PEP process or through another state? So what I saw with or heard with everything that you said in regards to leaving the onus up to the educational institutions or the PEP process, where would that one person have come that never had any of that, I guess?
Okay, so here is what has happened. And it's why we got out of doing initial education. Once we got all, you know, we did initial education for 10 years, but then we moved away from it because what we saw was, instead of students coming into the initial program who were experienced midwives, we were getting people who had attended 4 births and were getting their education. And they thought, well, I'll check off these things. And I've attended 40 hours. I've got these things. So often they were PEP students moving into Oregon or wherever, sometimes from Idaho or Washington as well, or Northern California, who were working or planning to work in states or were coming from states where, for instance, IVs were not legal, or where they didn't have Legend Drugs and Devices authority like we do here. So while they had given injections often under the supervision of their preceptor, often they had never started an IV. They didn't have any thorough background in pharmacology or the specific drugs that our formulary allowed for. And their suturing skills were very inadequate. And their training in that was very inadequate. And so they were thinking that by coming and getting 8 hours of suturing class, theory and skills total, that was enough for them to feel completely competent, or because they had, and often it was the IVs that they were just not prepared for. So this college made the decision, we looked into offering a specific original LD&D training for people who were not our students that might have been a little less thorough, but it still was going to be many, many, many more hours than 40. And it just didn't make financial sense. People weren't interested in it because it was too expensive for them. So that, and it didn't address the problem of people moving in from state who had attended schools, perhaps MEC accredited schools that did require these things, but they still had to take the 40 initial hours because we didn't recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
So
will this skills and written examination cover and ensure those individuals that weren't allowed to do the IV injections, to evaluate, and that those people are qualified to do so? And if they fail that examination, then they're going to have to find someone now in Oregon to provide additional education in that domain, we'll call it, and then retake that examination until they can pass that exam to ensure that they're competent.
Absolutely. And that is the basis of all competency-based direct assessment education. This is a model that is used in other areas of higher education and even in K-12 education. The idea is you establish the competencies, whether it's knowledge or skills, and it's up to the student to figure out where they're going to get that information, although a school often will provide resources like here are articles to read or videos to watch or whatever. In the case of skills, then you'd have to figure out where you're going to get your hands-on practice. And then the job of the institution or the government or however you're looking at it is to establish the competencies and the tools for assessing those competencies. And so a direct assessment competency-based program, whether it's in English literature or in paramedicine or in whatever it's in, midwifery, and which is my background, you have to have very clear competencies that the student understands this is what you're going to be assessed on. And it's kind of a you do it or you don't kind of thing. Like you look at your skill, you break at least, and this is the part I think educators should do, not the state. But in the case of, say, doing an IV, we have tools, which I actually shared with you guys, that are a set of steps. And then some of those steps are marked as essential. If they miss that step, they're done, right? And there may be many of those steps as part of your skills assessment that if they miss that step or do that step incorrectly, they're done. So it doesn't matter whether they rub counterclockwise or clockwise with their alcohol wipe, right? That's not so essential. But what's essential is that they use an alcohol wipe, that kind of thing. So yes, pass the essential competencies in order to get the stamp of approval that they have passed that competency. And if they don't pass, they got to go back and figure out what they need. And it's important for students to receive feedback about what they didn't do correctly or what they didn't know. You did well on this thing, but you didn't do well on that thing. So they need feedback. But that doesn't mean you have to tailor the re-exam to just that skill. You can, and I believe should, require the whole skill. So using the stupid alcohol wipe thing, if they forgot to use an alcohol wipe when they were going through their IV steps, you can't just say, show me how to do an alcohol wipe, right? You have to say, integrate that skill into the whole skill so that you're getting the entire process correctly done so that we're using best practice.
So that examination would have to be weighted in regards to areas. So there would have to be some specific criteria established in regards to being able to evaluate that section as a whole. So if they forgot to do the alcohol wipe, they're not going to be able to pass that section, correct?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's going to have to be weighted appropriately, not just 1 point for
Oh yeah,
that.
you don't use points at all.
Yeah.
This isn't a point thing. You don't get I did this part right, but I did that part wrong, but I got enough points to pass. It's more like the way we do it is things with asterisks, using the mighty asterisk. If it has an asterisk, you have to get it. And if you get all of them except one asterisk, you still don't pass. Because you got to have all the asterisk things.
Okay.
And they're also often in an order. You know, you have to do the alcohol wipe before you insert the needle, right? You can't do it after you insert the needle because that's kind of defeating the point of the alcohol wipe.
So, and then, so that would be in lieu of the 40-hour submission verification. In order to administer those, you would have to submit that verification of passage of that skills and written, and then for the initial renewal, and then every subsequent would be the same type of written and assessment exam.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
This sounds like a
Sam, Greg has his hand raised.
Oh, I apologize.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Holly, so should somebody fail, is there a prescribed remediation requirement?
No, you would have to re-examine. You would have to, so because the idea behind competency-based education is that the student is responsible for how they acquire the knowledge, although we could provide resources. Like I said, here are the go-to places to get the information you need. The other thing we could require, if we feel like legally we have to, because it does talk about education, if we think competency-based assessment, which is a form of education that is widespread, you can look it up on Google and come up with a million articles about competency-based direct assessment education. But we could ask people to document how they got their education if you feel like that's important. But in itself, it would not be necessary or sufficient just to document that education. It wouldn't be sufficient because you got to pass the skills and the knowledge exams. And it wouldn't even be necessary in that it could be, I learned by working with my preceptor, Mary Jane Smith. That could be how she got her education. So there wouldn't be any criteria around the content of how she got it, just there would be a disclosure of how she got it. If we feel like we need that to meet the requirement in the law, in the statute, that we have education as well as.
So
This is Sammy.
Haley has her hand up, and can I say one thing in regards to what you just said, somewhat of like an attestation of obtaining the minimum objectives for the Legend Drugs and Devices? Is that kind of what you're saying, Holly? No,
not even that much. Just I received my training, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Haley,
This
did
is
you have a
Sammy.
question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, not a question, it's a statement. So one thing, I talked about this at length this morning. And I mean, we actually deal with some competency-based education already, oddly in cosmetology. They have a whole program just related to competency-based. So take away the hour part, right? It's kind of the difference. So we have some knowledge about that. It sounds like the exam piece would be a lot like what we do in body piercing. There are areas in that examination, if you don't meet it, you fail. It just is what it is. You don't glove right, you're out.
Right.
And you got to retest the whole thing. So we do have some awesome knowledge in that area. I think I could write a rule that would not tie those competencies to an hour, because nowhere in our statute does it say that training needs to be hour-based, right? So kind of a sheet, here are the competencies, I got them, and then I pass the skills test, sign. I think that would meet the objective of the law. I think what are those competencies? We need to know that and put that in the rule. That's what you guys will need to determine. And then how in depth you want those competencies to look in the rule. Is it, you know, A, suturing, and then you give 4 or 5 bullets on what those objectives are? I don't know how far you want to get, because what you, like you said, Holly, we need to give the applicant as much information as possible so they know what they have to know. I mean, that's our job as a licensing entity, that in order for you to get X, you have to meet X. And what does X look like? So again, that's your guys' job. I think it's doable. I think we need to work out what that looks like as far as letters on paper, and then what are the tools for supervisors, schools, organizations to teach it or train them on it, and then what that final skills test look like. Do we create it? Is it just, I don't know. That's really where we need your guys' expertise. So that's all I have.
The other thing, Sammy, we talked about this morning in regards to continuing education is the law said training in for renewal. So we were training is different for continuing education than an assessment. And I think we talked about getting legal advice in regards to the 5 hours for the renewal of continuing education. If you do an assessment for the not the initial, the every other, does it have to be tied to that hour on the continuing education, or does it have to just be tied to those competencies? Do you want to expand on that a little? Did I make sense? Sam?
I have one. Let me just ask this as well. So, just from my mind. So currently the way the rule is written is we have your initial 48 hours, 40 hours. And then that's for, and you can get that before you become licensed, you know, in your first 2 years. It has to happen somewhere in there. And then every subsequent renewal, every 2 years, 5 hours. My understanding is that that's not how it will work, is you guys will have these competencies and this test, and every 2 years, you got to meet it. Every 2 years, the same, you meet the same. Check, checking, check. It's not going to be different. It's standard. Every 2 years, you got to meet the same criteria. Is that accurate?
Assuming that there hasn't been some sea change of understanding about how to do an IV or whatever. I mean, part of the problem with tying legend, drugs, and devices into continuing education is that continuing education is supposed to be new stuff. But we've been giving injections the same way since I was a kid, and my grandmother, who was diabetic, was giving injections. Like, there isn't anything new very much about giving injections. There's nothing new about the meds haven't changed that much. Sometimes there's a little bit, but so the idea being that if we do add a drug and we add that to the formulary and we then add that to the test, that people would be responsible for knowing about that new drug. So it's not that the test would never be updated or the skills would never be updated, but yes, you're right. If there were no drugs added to the formulary and there was no new skill that was added or new device that we needed to have a skill around, then the test could be exactly the same as it was.
Okay.
Because the skill is exactly the same. It's not new. So strictly speaking, LD&D should never have been put in the statute under continuing ed. But that was ancient history. Just getting it passed in one legislative session was like a Christmas miracle. So we don't question ancient history anymore because it happens.
But it's not doable. It's doable. I can definitely do it. I just want to make sure that we're not working from two different, the initial and the renewal. Like we're working from.
Other people might be thinking something completely different. You called on me, and so I told you what I thought.
Haley has her hand up. Haley, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, just so that it sounds like we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, neonatal resuscitation or BLS, like we have these renewals of certification every 2 years as providers that we have to do. And either as a new provider or a renewal, it's the same test. And a lot of the times it's all online modules. And so people can do their didactic portion and then have an in-person skills. And so, not to be redundant, you know, I think Holly clarified everything really well as far as like having that hands-on, having somebody check off your skills, but also making sure you have that knowledge base I think that would be totally sufficient. I don't know how much time that would take, but just mirroring what we already have for those certifications, I feel as a provider, those are sufficient enough every 2 years. And then you can continue to update as your formulary changes. So like tranexamic acid, if that ever is added to your formulary, then we can update that as we go. But I feel like that would be sufficient.
So what does that examination look like, or not what does it look like? Who's administering that, and who's responsible for that exam?
So those are
Can we go?
tests. For like BLS, that's American Academy of Pediatrics, or there's a bunch of different organizations you can take them through, but they have to be regulated, and so certain facilities will allow those in-person tests to happen. So I don't know if that would be through the Oregon Health Authority or if this would be through more something with midwifery based. You guys might know that more than me.
Well, I guess my question was really in regards to this new assessment, this written and skills assessment. Who will be writing those, and who will be in charge of updating those, and how does that look to you?
Well, I don't know if that's part of the board. I'm always happy I love writing rules and regulations if that's something you need help with. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know if you would appoint somebody to that. That I think that would be part of our meeting here, is having somebody maybe in this meeting or reaching out to another person.
So would the OMC be in charge of that? And then what if somebody went to a preceptor? Would that preceptor be able to administer that exam, the skill and written exam, or would they have to take that at the OMC or through MEC accredited or a pre-accredited school? I guess in my mind, I'm just kind of wondering what you guys are.
Yeah.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, a little too far down the road.
Oh, okay.
A little too far. Sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So couldn't it so the way that it's set up now, if I understand correctly, is that the board certifies people who administer LD&D, right? So like OMC has been approved by the board to certify LD&D, and Birthing Way has been approved by the board to certify LD&D. So like once we have this test, couldn't we just have people like the same process where like OMC could be certified to administer the test, or Birthing Way could be certified to administer the test, so that the board approves people who give the examination?
Yeah.
It's similar to how we do peer review. We set out some requirements, what you have to have in order to be part of the peer review process. You have to, you can't be part of this. So we'll set those objectives out for the supervisory, requiring whoever knows that you've met the skills, check it off. So set that criteria. That way HLO doesn't become part of this myriad of, are you checking approved? We just know that you've met this set of criteria and we're moving on.
And in that way, you are approving people, not certifying people. I would skittishly avoid the word certified, because that has its own whole veneer. So HLO would be approving or authorizing or using some word that starts with an A.
And I also think, going back to Holly said, if new medications become available, those would also be put into the rule. So it's not like, new medication, that has to still have a process. We have to go through the rule process to add those into the list. So those types of things shouldn't get forgotten about. They should be, up to par, and then we're putting in the rule, and then the, training and then skills is following suit with that, or in together, however you want to put it. So I think now, and of course, if I'm wrong, someone say so, we need to really determine what are those objectives? What does applicant need to learn, train, and so what are those? And is
Well-
there anything that was previously written that we can glean from and not reinventing the wheel?
So
Sure, yeah.
I think they're already set out in the LD&D. They're already, the difference is you call them, instead of a curriculum, you call them course objectives, or what was the word? What's the other word that I used?
Competencies.
Competencies. Yes. So we've already got a start to what we need. We just have to basically take off the hour requirement, make sure that for the educational piece, no matter where you get it, these are the objectives or the competencies that you have to complete, whether it's MEC accredited, pre-accredited, or through at the PEP, or coming from out of state. And then,
Well, there are definitely differences between learning objectives, which is what we have in the curriculum, and competencies. So learning objectives aren't necessarily, so for instance, for the drugs, we say that the curriculum includes for each drug a whole list of things that you need to learn. And for each one, it's mechanism, and, you know, I don't have it right in front of me, but all those things. But that doesn't mean you necessarily want an exam that for every drug asks the student to tell us all of those things, right? That would be a very big exam that would be very crazy. So you can have a list of recommended learning objectives. Here are the things from which you will be tested, but that's different than saying what needs to be on the test. And there's a difference between a skills test and a knowledge test as well. So being aware of that. I want to address what Sammy said real quick before we move on. There are two ways to do these exams. We could come up with a prototype exam that everybody uses the exact same exam. And for that to work, it probably needs to be released by HLO or the licensing board or something, whoever writes it. And then it needs to be reviewed, not every 10 years. It needs to be reviewed frequently, at least every year, right? Because while things stay the same, some things do change a little bit here and there, and emphasis changes as well. So they would need to be updated. Or we could put together, the board could approve a list of essential competencies that must be examined, like a skeleton of competencies. And those competencies could be fairly detailed in terms of skills. These essential pieces must be in the test. Or for knowledge, it could be these essential drugs must be covered in such and such a way. But leave the actual crafting of the multiple choice test or the fill in the blank or the online versus the written or whatever to whoever's administering it. So those are two different ways of approaching it. And one would involve HLO in a more ongoing role and a more intrinsic role than the other. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. In a way, as an educator, I love standardized tests because then I don't have to worry about it. But having a standardized test would mean more state involvement potentially.
well,
So I think Catherine has her hand up.
Yes. Oh, Catherine, I want to make, Catherine, I'll get right to you. I wanted to make a statement in regards to what Holly said. We used to have an examination, the examination criteria listed in the Legend Drugs and Devices. So there is already a start to that. Now, it's been many, many years since I've looked at that, but there are some competencies specified in regards to that exam. The written, I believe, was it a skills or a written? I can't remember.
They were recommended how much time to spend and how to proportion out the exam. They weren't exam questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you,
well,
Holly.
I just was going to say, it sounds like, there's this piece about the skills exam and written exam that would be, for the initial and a renewal every 2 years that, we're trying to figure out how to, write that, where it would be administered from, et cetera. But then there's also the piece of the things that people need to learn initially. And it sounds like we're trying to figure out a replacement for, like, if Birthing Way doesn't want to do that initial, you know, for people who are coming in without a MEC accredited education that have already covered those things. Like, it seems like, you know, preceptors would need to be somehow approved to say that their student has done those things if it's like a PEP student. But it seems like maybe there needs to be a list of things that the student has learned, more than saying at a taste, like you were saying, Holly, and like attesting that you have this education. I don't know if that would cover that, but it seems like there would be more than saying I got my education with this preceptor, saying I have covered these things in my education, and like some kind of list about that or something. I don't know.
Catherine, why do you think that would be essential?
Well, I guess it sounds like you're saying you don't think 40 hours of initial LD&D training is enough. Like, you didn't feel good about it in some kind of, you know, moral sense of, you know, sending this person on their way. So it sounds like without that, we're saying they can just take this test and be fine.
Well, they can take the test, but if they don't have any training and education, they won't pass it.
Yeah.
I mean, if students had come to us who were trained in other states through PEP, 40 hours probably would have been fine for them. The problem is we were getting brand new midwives who hadn't been through anything, who thought 40 hours was sufficient. Mm-hmm. And we didn't feel like it was sufficient. So, but other people might have thought it was sufficient, you know. So getting away from the hours thing and the educational criteria is what we're aiming for here, being truly, if we want to be truly competency based. I'm not opposed to what you're suggesting, but
yeah, I guess I'm just curious, trying to understand like what we're needing to put in the rule. And in, you know, there used to be a whole list of initial LD&D training and everything that needed to be covered and, you know, all that kind of stuff in the rule. And if we're taking all of that out, then what will be the basis for training?
We'd have the same list, but it would be, this is what you're going to be assessed on. Mm-hmm. And it might even be a more detailed list. Mm-hmm. So how you got the training? I didn't understand, Patty.
Probably more detailed.
Yeah, sorry. Potentially more detailed. So, but instead of saying this is what you must have been trained in, we're saying this is what you must show us you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
so in other words, you may have someone who only needs 1 hour in suturing. And you might have somebody who needs 10. And not tying it to hours.
40.
Right. So not tying it to an hour gives you flexibility to say, Colleen is great at IVs and meets all the competencies and tests out, but Julia may need 60 hours. Who knows, to become proficient and competent, right? That's the whole basis. Yeah. So I think we need to
from the hours, taking it away from the hours and putting it as a program.
Yes. So let's just start, if it's okay, let's just start making a list of what that looks like. And then this is just a list on a whiteboard. Of course, we can massage it as we go, but let's just make a list. Everybody okay with that?
Things to be tested on.
Or what things do we need to make, what do you need to be competent in these areas?
Well, of course, I already sent you a ton of material that demonstrates what I think, you know, what we've decided necessary to be competent.
Right. And we have a list from Birthing Way from the 5 different classes that cover all of these things. Yeah.
Tons of competencies. And we have the, you know, there are nursing texts, there are paramedic texts. I have a couple big paramedic textbooks. They're big. Sitting in a chair behind me right now, there are midwifery skills books like the citation I sent to you guys last month. There's a lot of breakdown into skills. So my question is, do you want us to go over the specifics or just the general, here are the skills that need to be done? Is that what you're asking for, Sammy? Because
let's start with the general and then fill in let's start with the general and then see what it looks like. And 2, do you want someone to type this as we go on screen? Would that be helpful? And we share the screen with you.
Well, it might be easier to share some materials that people like that we've shared, or maybe Julia has shared, so that people have something to start with and review and make notes on. And then maybe even do that not during this meeting, but come back to the next meeting having gone, this looks good, but I really think we need to add this, or rather than starting from scratch right now without something in front of us, because I've already done that, and that's a lot. That's way more time than we have today to start from scratch with a whiteboard going, what do we need to know? And it's already been done by many people, not just Birthing Way and not just Julia and I, but many people have already done that work. So
Holly, so the information that you sent me, what I'm hearing you say is you would like me to draft something up and put something together so this committee could actually look at that as a starting point?
Yeah, or just share what I sent, and maybe Julia would be willing to share some stuff that she has, and or anybody who has stuff. Just kind of, be great to see what Greg thinks in terms of necessary skills or critical skills.
Colleen has her hand up.
Yeah, I think the NRAMT for paramedics has the checklist in a form and fashion that really speak to the, just like you've discussed, those points that are not failures. These are the absolutes. It's not a graded or a weighted thing. It's a must do. So I'm looking for one. I can share one right now.
Be great.
And Colleen has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I think when we're kind of thinking about these lists, so to speak, with the information that Holly has and maybe Julia or Greg is able to share, is that we were talking a little while back between both skills and knowledge. So I think we want to really keep those two lists separate and perhaps just focus on one and then the other. I think we're going to get really convoluted if we're not separating them out really clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree.
And let's start with skills because it's easier.
Much easier.
I was going to say knowledge.
Who's responsible for writing the knowledge-based didactic evaluation?
Has to be determined.
That's one of my pet peeves, is having the oldest, most experienced person in the room write an exam. Well, that doesn't make them an educator or an exam writer.
Exactly.
So that's been a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
So Holly,
I
just want to make sure I can go ahead and send that information out to the committee members that you sent to me.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. We're okay with that. We're okay with sharing.
I'm sending it out right now.
That way we can get feedback and make it even better.
Yeah. This is Sammy. I wanted to weigh in, on what Holly said about administration of the exam, of the skills. How do we determine proficiency and competency, the skills assessment? So here are my concerns. One, HLO is well-versed in writing, administering, and all with exams. We do it for many of our boards. It is a workload, obviously, on First Corinthia. With that said, I think that's probably the most appropriate way of going, only because it worries me that we'd say, here's what skills they need to have, and then leave it up to OMC to write, and basically an examination. Or if we may be, an individual may be meeting these requirements to make sure that these people meet these skills competencies, right? It may not be an organization. It could be an individual person. And then leaving them up to write this skills assessment, test out, that seems like a lot for even an organization and or an individual. As an educator, Holly, and I think everybody has probably had their hands in some kind of test writing in their life. Even I have, and I'm not good at that kind of stuff. So definitely, I think it probably is better from from HLO's standpoint, keeps us, on track, keeps the regulatory piece, keeps it consistent. And I'm pretty sure if I was to ask the legal question, consistency is going to be key there. When I ask them, if I'm testing Holly this way and Haley a different way, that really doesn't make sure that everybody's getting the same information. So definitely need to be HLO administered, I think.
Right?
In this, and I would think that we would need subject matter experts in order to write that exam, which likely would be this group, I would think. Which then also continues to extend our timeline, which is fine.
For both
Okay,
the
that's
skills
what I have to say.
assessment, Sammy, for both the skills assessment and the written, you think that HLO needs to administer that?
I don't know that, well, it depends on if they believe that there's a written aspect to the competency, making sure they're competent, or is it just a skills is skills is skills? Can you do X? Do you need to have the theoretical part in a test?
I don't know that it's theory part. I think even in starting an IV, I need the student to be able to tell me the untoward effect, show me the signs that the line is running clearly, show me the signs that it's occluded.
Right. And there's
Would that be,
there's a difference between HLO creating and making available a standardized test and having to administer that test. You can still approve people to administer the test with the checklist for the skills and the written test that they're administering appropriately versus giving them a list of competencies and saying, write your own test. So you could create the test, but HLO wouldn't necessarily have to administer the test. I'm blowing Sammy's mind. She is just...
Colleen, did you?
this would be different. This would be different for us.
Like for when we're talking,
We don't just say have a test and someone go do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
hang on.
talking about skill demonstration, like I think it's important to have people approved to like a list of people or skills qualifications to be able to supervise skills so that people all over the state can do that, right? Because like what I've run into and found is like we have people in Southern Oregon or Central Oregon who are having a hard time. Either I end up traveling there or they're coming here, but it's very expensive and cost prohibitive because, I mean, they're coming for several days. They have to feed themselves and house themselves and all this stuff, right? So if you're like the way it's set up now, right, like an LDM can certify all of these things, right? So if you have a checklist of this is what they have to do to prove, you know, that they can successfully start 4 IVs or 5 IVs or however many we decide we want them to do, have LDMs or, you know, paramedics or whoever who can apply to be, you know, not certified, approved to oversee the skills part so that people in all parts of the state can do that without having to travel to get that part done.
Yeah, you have approved examiners. In effect, that's what NRP and Bourne do for neonatal resuscitation. You have approved assessors who've met criteria, and they use standardized forms to assess the skills, and they use a standardized written exam to assess the theory part of that, whatever you're doing. And that test, the skills test and the written test, is created by the agency. In the case of NRP, it's AAP and American Heart. Their experts create the test, and then the authorized providers of the test provide the skills test. And the written test is done online, like Haley talked about. But the skills test is done in front of an approved evaluator. You don't go to the headquarters of the American Heart Association and take your skills test, just like you shouldn't have to go to Salem to take a skills test. You know, you would have evaluators that meet whatever the criteria the board approves, and they would use whatever the tools are that the board approves to do the assessment of the skills, a checklist or whatever with instructions. But anybody who is authorized or approved by the board or HLO could do that if they met the criteria. And then the written test could be given online through HLO, because it isn't going to be that, you know. Right.
Now, online through HLO, that means a couple different things. Online is through, I can sit there and do it in my house through Workday, or it used to be iLearn, it's Workday. I can sit there and I can take that written exam. It's open book. I can sit with anybody and I can take that examination. And those questions are not protected, not confidential. I can print them out. I can give them to anybody. I can sit in my home and in a devil's advocate way, somebody else can actually answer those questions for me.
That's right.
Or we could administer that examination in-house at our office, and those questions are protected, and we verify that that individual is the one taking and passing that test. Those are,
Yeah, or you could
Aren't
have
there-
somebody take it in person in front of the same person who does the skills assessment. They just use a standardized test to do it, and that might be the easiest. Because the problem with the online testing, and we do theory online testing, but we have to grade those tests again, because if the student adds even so much as the word "the" in front, or adds MLS for Mills when Mills is already part of the answer. It was a fill in the blank. And then so it says 100 Mills. The test will throw it out and go, no, that's wrong, when in fact it's right. So you got to word them so carefully and create automatic answers that are so carefully thought out that it is hard to write those kinds of online tests appropriately. But having something that somebody could take either in writing or online, however, that is approved by the board, and the assessor is approved by the board, you could do the written test right there as well. Make sure they're being supervised. So
Yeah, I definitely don't think we should make people go to Salem to take the test.
I agree.
Haley has her hand up.
Well, I just was wondering if it'd be sufficient to do these tests like bi-monthly or monthly, and maybe as an incentive for people renewing, like if they've have more than 2 years of practice or more than 5 years of practice, but have to renew their license, then they could also sign up to be a designated person to give this exam. I don't know, just a thought. And then they're renewing their license, but also then we gain somebody who can help administer these skills.
So when you're talking about having an OMC or a MECA credit or a pre-aid credit or another individual administer these exams that are set out and established by the office and the board, administration, you have no control over how often and where and who, in the sense of, the approved individuals are going to be providing that. So someone in Southern Oregon has been approved by the board because we set out the criteria for them. They have access online, how I'm seeing it, access online on Workday to take this test. However, they have to take this test with their approved individual. And one of the things I heard is not the preceptor, it would have to be someone else. And so that criteria would have to be put out there as well. And so again, we couldn't schedule those for whoever's administering them. So we would hope that individuals in the OMC and the educational institutions will be providing them regularly, is what that hope would be. And Greg, I had a question. You said you had some information you were going to send me so I could share it with this committee.
Oh, sure. I'll send it to you now.
Okay.
Haley, are there any tools that you're familiar with being a CNM that you think are particularly good, or a nursing textbook or site that you think would be excellent for us to refer to?
In regards to like training or
yeah, the assessment criteria.
Oh, I have so much. I can look through what I have for my skills for my RN students, for like specific for IVs and Foleys and things like that. I'm happy to send what I have to the group.
That'd be awesome.
Yes, Haley, if you could send that to me, that way I could send it out to the full committee. And so we're not violating any meetings laws.
Not a problem. And I got to dive into my Google Docs. So yeah, I can do that later.
Very good. So creating these standards for the skills and the written, and putting out the criteria for the required training.
Not
It's
the required training, the required assessment.
a required assessment, but the initial education for people who have to take, whether they're from another state or they're going through MEEC accredited or the PEP process, we have to create the standard without the hours to put out there so individuals know what they have to do.
Well, I would say you need to create a comprehensive list of the competencies that they need to be able to demonstrate. That's the shift in competency-based education, competency-based assessment, and direct assessment is here's what you need to know if you want to pass this test.
Gotcha.
Here's what you need to know if you're going to successfully demonstrate this skill. And
some people will need to take a class to get there and some people won't.
Exactly. And some people may need to take 5 classes to get there and some people won't. Some people can just read the book and practice on a friend, and other people need to go to a organized course. And like Greg said, it is not a weighted thing. It's a yes or no thing. You must have this thing. You have it or you don't. You have demonstrated it or you have not. And that's very much easier to do with skills than it is with knowledge. Which is why I think we should tackle skills first and have that maybe be next meeting after everybody's reviewed the material. We could look at it and go, you know, using this as our outline, move this here and add this and do this, and you know, and then come up with maybe at the end of a meeting, we might be able to have a working draft that we can then think about and review for the January meeting of, yeah, this looks like it might be a good working thing on skills. Theory is going to be a matter, I think, of having done this multiple times, is of looking at all the knowledge that there is. And for that, we might want to break into little subgroups potentially, or not. But, you know, everything there is to know about Pitocin. What is the essential thing you need to know about Pitocin? Those are the things that need to be on the exam. Everything you need to know about ROGAM. What are the essential things you need to know about ROGAM? What are the essential things you need to know about starting an IV? What are the essential things? And that's why we do separate written exams, because one exam would be really big. So we divide them into 5 different exams or 4 different exams. But there's a lot, because what the law sets out is not just IV, but shock and treatment of shock. It's all of the drugs and the pharmacological concepts. It's administration of not just IVs, but the different kinds of injections and potentially other, you know, we also have potentially rectal administration of misoprostol. We have oral administration of some drugs. So it's not just IV and injection. It's administration of drugs in all the forms that ours could have. We have local anesthesia, which could be applied topically. So it's a pretty big thing. So, but you can't have a test that tests every single piece of knowledge. So you have to kind of focus in on what are the essential pieces, either because they're so basic that you want to make sure everybody knows it, or because they can affect quality of life or survival. Like if you give this drug incorrectly, you could kill her. Or if you do, you know, like, so you might end up not having very many questions on oxygen, you know, because you'd have to give a lot of oxygen with a non-rebreather mask under weird circumstances to kill somebody on oxygen, right? In the context that we're working in. But epinephrine, that's a different story, right? So getting the theory test is going to be a matter of identifying what the essential pieces of knowledge are in each of the areas, the pharmacology, the shock treatment, you know, what are the essential pieces that you need to know?
So within our office, what we call that is an information bulletin. And what it does is it lists everything out on your written examination. And so that's the first page is all the items that you need to test on. And then the second page is all the subsets of Pitocin. What do you need to learn, or oral, all the things within this category is within that information bulletin. And then what you do is based on that bulletin, then you start preparing your examination.
Right.
So then you start stacking, as you say, these sets and subsets within the information bulletin to create your comprehensive examination. And you start item writing, where you start writing these questions out with a committee. And so and then with your competencies, what I can do is if you guys could send me all of the competency information that you have, like you have, Holly, so I can put a document together for this group to start from. Because what I've discovered over the last 25 years is that you have to have something for this committee to look at to start and move around. Otherwise, starting with a blank piece of paper, we'll be here for a long, long time.
Years.
So my suggestion is if every one of you committee members could send me any skill information, and then I'll start putting that document together. And then I will also start putting an information bulletin together and a map. I also call it a map, supporting that bulletin, so we can start creating an examination.
And we're
If
still talking just skills at this point, not also the knowledge test, or are you?
I'm talking about both. So the skills, putting together all these skills in a document together in regards to what they're going to have to prove, and then the written examination. So these skills that you'll send me, I'll start putting this document together, and then on the written, I'll put the information bulletin together, and then with the information that you have already sent me and what everybody else is going to send me. And then at our next meeting, then we can start with documents.
Mm-hmm. Well, I should warn you that I sent you our skills assessment tools. I did not send you the learning objectives. Okay. I didn't send you the competencies. You're going to get a whole lot more stuff.
Okay. Perfect. Well, and that's what I'll start putting together for this committee to be able to look at, to be able to move forward. And it sounds like with this process is not going to be a short process by any means, especially when you start doing item writing and putting together examinations. It does take quite a bit of time to do so.
I'm super interested in hearing how everybody feels about this right now. Does this seem like a good direction? Are people behind? Because I can speak powerfully about what I believe, and I like to know what everybody else thinks too. Does this feel like we're going in a good direction, or like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not? It sounds like we're doing crazy stuff.
Why don't, Holly, we go through the list and get each individual to be able to discuss what their opinion is, and I'll start with Colleen.
Yeah, I think this is a good direction. I think gathering some information and having material to start moving around on a virtual whiteboard would be great. I just want to reiterate that I'd love to just kind of do one piece at a time and start with the skills. My experience has been with writing rules for 4 years that it's just going to get convoluted. And if we can just stay on the task and just do skills, and then just do the written knowledge competency piece of it. I also want to say that I really support the idea of the written exam piece being a standardized exam that is written by the board in collaboration with HLO, and that is the exam that gets administered, recognizing that there are access issues for that test and legitimacy issues for how and where people take that test. I think we can tackle that down the line. And I do think we need to tackle that piece of it. I also think that the skills portion of this needs to be part of that, written by us with the board and in collaboration with HLO and have a standardized review process every year or two at the most by the board to just be sure that there aren't new pieces of information, knowledge, and certainly if new drugs or devices get added to the formulary. But I think my experience for 4 years of writing the current rules is that if we don't stay focused on one piece of this at a time, then we're going to be here forever. And I'm riding my bike, so, and I ain't gonna be here doing this.
Okay.
Yes, it can get convoluted. And
Okay.
yes.
Julia.
And I will add, I'm just going to make a quick statement. I'm going to draft up kind of what where we're going. And I'm just going to run some stuff by our legal counsel, make sure that we're in a lawful area, make sure we're meeting the intent of the law. And I'll do that before our next meeting. And sometimes I can present that information. If it's legal advice, we need to go into executive session, and Heather would come. So I'll work on that piece, just so that we're in line. I hate doing all this work and then having to go back because we missed the mark as far as law goes. So that's all I have.
Will we get minutes from this meeting today? Look at the two of you.
I do a memorandum when I do rules advisory committees, and that will be 100% to Corinthia.
I can do a summary of the meeting. Not minutes, but I can do a summary of the meeting. Yes.
And share that with us.
Yes.
That's always
absolutely.
super helpful for me to stay on track.
Exactly. Now I have a question for you, Sammy. Julia, before I get to you, Sammy, did you want to check with legal counsel before I even start putting these skills together?
No, I think we're okay. I'm just, it's basically words on paper. Want to make sure that what we're thinking, however we do it, we can tailor it to meet that criteria. Just want to make sure, the word training does skills, meet that. I think we're fine. Just want to run that by Heather and make sure that we're in line. But yes, go ahead, move forward. We can always tweak it to meet what the requirement is, for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Julia, do you want to give your input?
Sure. I think this is a great direction. I am really excited about the possibility of moving to competency-based stuff. The hour requirements in the various areas is really, really hard to deal with when you're working with students from a variety of, coming from different places, right? Like MEEK students versus PEP students versus midwives who have been practicing for a decade in another state. They don't all need the same thing and in the same areas. And even just having a class of 6 versus a class of 3, you're going to get more questions and discussion and different, it just is. I'm excited about this, and I think it's the right way to go. And I think it will be more streamlined and more beneficial in terms of people working toward licensure.
Great. Thank you. Greg, did you want to give your input?
Absolutely. I definitely am supportive of the competency-based approach. I think it's the right way to do business. I would, again, I feel strongly about the written examinations. The hardest class I've ever taken in my entire life was grading and evaluation. So writing exams, I believe, is a difficult thing. I would like to suggest that maybe we look to finding a professional nurse educator, somebody with a background in nursing education, to take a look at whatever product we come up with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Greg, why nursing education instead of midwifery education?
And the only reason I brought that up is because there's a prescribed course of study for training nurse educators. But no, I think that you might find somebody with a strong skill set in the field of midwifery as well. Absolutely.
Sounds like you just volunteered for the committee to work on the written exam. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know about the rest of you. But
That's where my passion is, so I'd be happy to.
great.
Wonderful. Great. Catherine?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that it seems great to focus on the competencies and skills training, and having a standardized written exam makes sense to me. I think the things that are coming to mind for me are just like really wanting to focus on making sure that that it's actually accessible for people all over the state in, you know, a low cost way, and making sure that there are avenues for classes to come about for people who are moving to the state who do need some additional initial training and class taking stuff.
Perfect. Dr. Beeson?
I appreciate that we're heading in a standardized direction. Yeah, I feel like a lot of what I would say is redundant to what you guys are saying. But the only other thing I wanted to note was there is a way to do a proctored exam online through Proctorio. The only thing is like expense. So I don't know if that would be the student paying for that or HLO or what. And that would mean they would need also internet access, computer, and a camera that would work. But just something to note, and we can look into the details later.
I can answer one of your questions, or in regards to HLO would not pay for something like this. So I do know that. So it would be up to the individual themselves that would have to pay for something like this. So, but again, we can definitely look at those options as we get closer to that portion of it.
I've had to use it many times as a student, and I paid for it, and it was just part of like, it stinks, but then at least I didn't have to travel, so I factored in the fact that it was as much as I would pay for gas. Yeah.
So roughly how much was it, Haley?
I think I paid $15 to be able to take a 3-hour exam. I can't remember the last one, so it really is not bad. And you have somebody that's there to sit there and like monitor. They're not on the screen, and so you don't see somebody watching you, which is nice. But you do have to sign in, and you have to show a badge or show some type of ID, like your driver's license, so that it's you. It is you.
$15 is reasonable. I thought when I heard you start to go fifth, and I thought you were going to go 1,500. I was like,
oh no.
I was like, no.
And I wonder if something like that is better placed on the person of OMC's, you know, who we've approved, that they may create something like that and provide that outlet, and that may be what happens. And if the individual's the person who is, you know, ensuring that competency is met, that they may do face-to-face because it works better for them. But yeah, I think that's a great and definitely a tool we can put out to, once this is all done, on things that you can use to move forward with the training and competency skills.
With our evolving pandemic, just so that we have
Exactly.
For sure.
But Proctorio
And it'll be
and resource, I don't know. I'm sure there's other resources out there.
And in the rule, we can ensure that we don't limit that possibility. Would be important, not limiting that they could do, you know, the practical piece, skills piece online, if not, you know, not limiting the rule to be face-to-face would be the key there. So good point. Thank you.
So, to sum it up, you guys are all going to send me your skill information, any information that you have that you want me to put into some document in regards to these competencies that we're going to put together. In addition, I'm going to work on an information bulletin for the written. However, we're going to focus on one in regards to the competencies, so it doesn't get convoluted, and we're not here forever. And we will have that document and available for our December 9th meeting. And Sammy will work with legal counsel to make sure that everything is, you know, as we're moving forward, that if we need to align something differently. And yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything that I missed? Does anybody want to make any comments in regards to what I stated?
Cynthia, could you organize that document by skill set? So it's not just a hodgepodge, but IV skills combined from everybody's input, and then meds by injections, like that. That would be super helpful. I assume you would do that anyway, but just in case, I thought I'd suggest it.
Absolutely.
Is there somebody the group wants to designate? Holly, Colleen, Haley, designate if we have questions during the interim that way we kind of keep it to one person, because we may have questions just as far as, we don't know anything about IV stuff. So someone that we could, reach out to say, how is this looking? Are we moving in the right direction? Do you want to appoint somebody in that role? Would be helpful at least for me and probably Cynthia.
Somebody you want to
Holly.
to appoint somebody. I appoint Catherine. Why don't you ask for volunteers first?
Does anybody want to volunteer? I'm sorry, what, Sam?
It could even be maybe an LDM, or it could be Greg or Haley from the more medical model. It could be two people.
Yeah,
But just someone
to be
who
able
we
to
can
answer
contact.
questions about the skills. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. And always you guys can contact me, you know that. So I'm easily.
So basically what I would do, here's what this would look like. When I'm getting all your feedback and I'm putting in together in categories, what I would do is I would take that draft document and I would send it to you, Catherine. And I would say, have I missed anything? Is this kind of on target with what we talked about? Is there anything that I need to add? Is it formatted like readable and, concise for somebody else to understand? Is this committee going to be okay with this? That kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Perfect.
Great, thank you.
And then the other thing in regards to this, even though we're starting with these competencies in the beginning, as we're working on that information bulletin and those examinations and writing those examination questions, is there someone that you would like me as well to utilize as a contact for that? I know, Greg, you had said that that's your expertise and you're really into the item writing. Did you want to volunteer for that portion of it?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up? Okay, sorry, I didn't see
He
the
said
thumbs
yes.
up. Okay, very good. Okay, and we'll get there eventually. That's going to kind of be after on the second half of this committee. So perfect then. And I will, Holly, put together a summary of this meeting and I will send it to everyone. Can we have a date that everyone can get those skill sets to me? Is like a week, 2 weeks going to work for everybody? Can we put out there 2 weeks? Perfect. So 2 weeks from today, if everybody can get those skill sets to me, then I can start working on that document. And that'll give me time, and when I'm out on, surgery, and then to come back for our December meeting.
So that would be October 7th is 2 weeks from today, Thursday.
Perfect. And then Catherine, I'll start working with you once I start creating this document, okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, perfect. And I will follow up with an email to the committee members as a reminder, probably about the 4th of October. If I haven't heard from all of you by then.
And just Greg and Haley, I don't know if you know this, but HLO oversees 17 boards and councils. So we don't just work with midwives. So there may be times where you don't hear from us. It's probably because we're working on body piercing or dental technology, but just for backgrounds, because we work with many professions. So it's a benefit that we get a lot of diverse ways of implementing things. We can glean from that experience. So just so you know, we haven't forgotten about you. We're here. And if you have questions, please reach out. Cynthia and I are here for, the administrative subject matter piece. And this has been a really good meeting. I'm impressed with this group, and the commitment that you're making, because it will be time consuming. I think we're good. Don't forget public comment. I don't know if there's anybody on the line for that, but we want to definitely let them weigh in. Cynthia, that was for you.
Yes, thank you, Sammy. So let me hang on, go to my, okay, so at this time, the Board of Direct Entry Midwives, Legend, Drugs, and Devices Continuing Education Committee will hear public interested parties' feedback. Members of the public, please wait until you have been recognized. Well, that's if we were in a meeting. So if there's any public that would like to make comment, please do so now. Nate, is there anybody on the phone? April?
Anybody?
Nathan or April, are you there?
Hello?
I'm going to call Nathan real quick on my phone because they're monitoring the
So if it turns out that the public hasn't been able to access this meeting for the last hour and a half, does that mean we have to do it again? Please say no.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even have an answer at this point. I mean, it would be a meeting that's been done. It would be violating public meetings law. I don't know. It's public record. Good. That's a great question. I don't know. April, where are you?
You're muted, Cynthia.
yes, Sammy. I just talked to Nathan and he said no one is on the public phone line.
Okay.
So with that, no one is there to provide public comments. So we're going to adjourn the meeting unless anybody has anything else they wanted to say before we did.
I have an unofficial hope your surgery goes well and take care of yourself. You're a precious being. And
thank you very much. It's shoulder surgery. So on my right arm, which I'm right-handed. So it's going to be a little difficult. So
the words
recovery.
Yeah, very quick recovery. Good PT.
yeah, yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, committee
Thanks,
members.
everyone.
Really
Yeah, thanks a bunch.
Great meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Glad to be here.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, you guys. So the Board of Direct Entry Midwives, Legend, Drugs, and Devices Continuing Education Committee meeting is adjourned at 11:45 a.m. Thank you very much. And I'll be in touch with you soon, Catherine, okay? See you guys later.